Welcome back to Untaming Masculinity, the podcast where we tackle issues relevant to men and their journeys to reclaim their masculinity. I'm Dan, and as always, I'm joined by my co-host, good friend Brad. What is going on this fine morning, sir?
Man, it is early. It's one of those days where you wake up and you're like, how in the world am I not still sleeping? But things are good, man. Life is good. Kids good. Wife's good. Everybody's happy. Nobody's mad at me. So it's a good time. What about you, man? You almost out of your remodel hell?
Yeah, we got the countertops in yesterday, so that's a big step. They got the backsplash up, so now it's just they got to grout and do all the little finishing touches, and I'm hoping by middle of next week we'll be good to go.
Nice. Who's more excited, you or your wife?
I think we are equally excited.
Good.
All right. So today we have a great guest on tap. We are joined by Dylan Bain. When he's not working his corporate finance job, Dylan is the voice behind the Fiscally Savage Podcast. Through that podcast and website, Dylan's objective is to provide men with tools and knowledge to make themselves fiscally sovereign. His own journey towards fiscal sovereignty is an interesting one and something we'll dive into today. So welcome to the show, Dylan.
Absolute pleasure to be here. Although I will 100% agree that it is early, so this is coming at you completely caffeinated this morning.
Hey, that's the way to go.
Caffeinated is the way of life, my friend.
What I would like to do, Dylan, is just start with you telling the guys a little bit about your background, and then we'll dig into a couple of things and have a good conversation. But let's just start with you telling them who is Dylan.
Oh, the background question.
Yeah.
So relevant to this conversation, I was a math teacher for 8 years. 2008 rolled around, and at the time I was working in mortgage banking, and obviously that didn't work out. And so I went back to school and became a teacher because that was like my jam. Like I was so excited. I didn't serve in the military, and I always kind of thought that the soldiers, protect the countries today, but the teachers protect the countries tomorrow, right? Like if you can't get to the youth early and educate them and instill them with good ethics and good perspectives, then we're not gonna make it as a nation. So that's kind of how I approach teaching. And then I got to a point where, one day my principal calls me into her office and says, hey, I need you to change some grades because we got to keep our graduation rate up. Now, any of my students who might be listening to this know that to pass my class was easy, to fail my class was hard, and these students had earned it. And when I told her no, she said, well, that's a shame because contracts for next year haven't come out, and we live in a small town, and I already know you're working 2 extra jobs and you only have health insurance for yourself and not for your family. So maybe you should go home and spend the night with your daughter and think about what the right thing to do is. And I did. I went home. I played with my daughter that night. I actually called in sick to my 3rd job. And after I put her to bed, I poured myself several stiff drinks and sat at my kitchen table thinking, the hell am I going to do? Because her thing was, think about what type of man your father or what type of father your daughter needs you to be. And she was trying to insinuate that I should just compromise my morals to keep the cash flow coming. Right. Yep. But what that sparked in me was does my daughter need me to compromise my morals, or does she need me to have a spine? And that's where the entire concept, because I realized that I didn't have a financial base. She had me by the financial testicles here, and there was nothing I could do about it. And so I'm sitting there, and I had this epiphany as I'm looking out the back door of my shitty apartment that's 2 doors down from a meth house while this guy's puking in the drainage ditch that's my backyard. God, there's got to be something more. And so I had this vision of what my life could be with a house and a yard, with my kids playing in the backyard, with steaks on the grill. And I became obsessed with making that vision, and anything would happen. So you ask who is Dylan Bain? The phrase that I always say is in my head, there was this little voice in my head that was hey, when life gives you lemons, make lemonade. And I was no, we're going to freeze the lemons. We're going to build a lemon cannon. We're going to return fire. Because if I bombard life hard enough, the fucker will stop giving me ammunition. And so when I walked into school the next day, I told the principal, I said, I'm not changing the grades. And she went, oh, you're making such a bad decision, Dylan. And then I invited her to do something extremely uncomfortable with her suggestion. And when she I shook her head. I told her to go fuck herself. And I walked out and I was like, oh my God, I just quit my job. Like, what am I going to do? But that kicked off, that's probably the best way to describe who I am as a person, because it kicked off this period of my life where it was no holds barred. I'm going to build this financial future. I'm going to get this house. I'm going to be the best at everything I do. And the person who I was before my principal called me in the office, that guy ceased to exist that night. He was completely gone. And what emerged after that is the Dylan Bain that everyone knows, loves, and sometimes hates.
Man, that is, wow. So I'm sure that the second you told her where to go and you walked out of her office, you were probably a little scared shitless because you're heading into a situation where you weren't financially set. What did those next steps look like? What happened from there?
You mean after I got done crying in the bathroom?
Yeah.
Well, so you Brad, you hit it right on the head of like, I took a leap of faith. Like in retrospect, it was like watching somebody else play me like a video game character. And part of the extra little bit of the story is they actually gave me a contract for the following year because they couldn't find a replacement for me. So I actually ended up with more runway. But you want to talk about an awkward fucking school year? Like, oh my God.
Yeah.
But it really, like, I sat down and I was like, okay, what do I want out of this situation? And I come to the determination of like, look, man, I'm a really hard worker. I was, one of my jobs was I was working in a small business tax office. I was bringing in my own clients and I got to keep half those billings. And I kind of just thought, you know what? I'm just going to take a bet on Dylan Bain, right? This whole system sucks. I can't do it. I don't know what I'm going to do. At the time, I figured it out pretty quickly afterwards. But at the time, I didn't know what I was going to do. I just knew I wasn't going to be a teacher anymore. That dream had died and that identity of myself was going to go away. And that really, like, I got into teaching because I wanted to be of service. I wanted to help educate. I wanted to be influential in people's lives. And I had realized that the classroom was not the place to do that anymore. And so, it really sits down of like, all right, I made my decision. Now I need to make it the right one. And so I pulled every resource I had, which wasn't a lot.
Man, so there's a lot to process there. And as you'd said, you were living in a situation that was less than ideal. 3 jobs, lived by the crack house. Things weren't going well.
Yeah. Well, and I was on food stamps and welfare. Like, there was just no way that this whole equation was going to work.
Yeah.
And a big part of it for me was, okay, part of the reason I'm in this situation is because they know this, right? The school system, that my principal knows of this situation. And so for me, looking at it, because her words were, go play with your daughter and think about what the right thing to do here is. And all I could think of during that period of time and afterwards was, my daughter deserves to have pony lessons, right? Like, my daughter deserves to have, I couldn't afford swimming lessons. So she deserves to have swimming lessons. I want her to have a bike. I want her to have a house. I want her to have a yard. I want her to have opportunities. Right. And so, for me, it's this idea that, like, none of that happens without finances. Like, none of it happens. There is no nobility in killing myself. There's no nobility in being on food stamps. I don't have the base to be the father that I need to be. And as time went on, getting my finances in order, figuring out how to keep the bills paid, going back to school and getting my CPA, all of those things, as I started doing that, what happened was a lot of men, and it was specifically men, asking me, bro, how do you do that? Which is really where Fiscally Savage ended up becoming born, because it was like, well, I can tell you how I did it. And so starting to help people do things like, what's your vision? Because for me, it was the house with the yard, with the kids in the backyard, the compliment from my wife, and the grill. That was the vision that drove me through all the dark nights, all the hard times, every last little bit of it.
I'm drawn to, my financial hardship background wasn't nearly that intense. I was a dumb post recent graduate. I don't know if that's really the right way to say that. I'd recently graduated from college. I had a girlfriend that I wanted to impress. So I didn't show up for work a couple times. I got myself fired and I was broke, and I was living off of a trunk full of food that my parents brought me for a good couple months. But the feeling of despair and hopelessness when you were financially constricted, it sucks, man. And that comes back to why so many men are probably coming to you at the time asking you how you're doing this and how this is possible. Because when you are held, like when you've got that vice grip on your balls financially, there's no more deflating feeling in the world. It hovers over you constantly. So the fact you did something about it, and that's incredible, man. That's being that lighthouse for so many men that not only could you do it, but others could as well. And I think that obviously from that was born your podcast and everything that you're about these days.
Well, it's interesting. You talk about like what to do, right? And I when you're in that pit of financial despondence, I think there's a lot of people who think, well, I just got to get my shit together, right? How many times have you heard that? I just got to get my shit together.
All the time.
Like, and at the time, like when people would come to me and say, hey, like Dylan, like how do you I got 2 questions for you. What do you do and how do you do it? And I would tell them like, oh yeah, well I have this spreadsheet, I have this plan, right? Because I did. I had a spreadsheet, I had a plan. I'm doing, this semester I'm doing this. This is when I have to get internships. This is, all the target places that I'm going to go for. And it never worked for any of them, right? It never worked. And I really, in the early days of doing financial coaching and working on my own career, I really believed that if I could just spreadsheet it well enough, it would work. And what I found out eventually was no, that the secret sauce for me was not the spreadsheet. It was the vision of the house with the yard and the steaks on the grill. And I could smell them. It was allowing the emotions of the money to actually grab hold of me and take me to where it needs to go. It was sitting down and all the days of getting up in the morning and going, man, I feel like I'm not worth this. And then you walk into the mirror and you look in the mirror and go, I am worth this. I'm worth every bit of this. And then you go in and you light the sky on fire every day, right? That emotional component is, it's not important component. It's the only component that matters. And so like, as my practice has evolved, like you're saying, like I desponded, I don't know what to do. I was a dumb college kid. Yeah. And you also didn't have direction and you were buried under shame. And you're worried about all this other stuff. And it's that emotions that are holding you down, not the fact that you don't know what to do. We all ultimately know what to do. We just need to get through the emotions.
But it sounds like the concept of having a really solidified why, like down to the minutest detail. Like you said, the smell of the steak on the grill and that, your kids playing in the backyard and just that super specific vision of why am I doing this gets you through or helps drive you through all that hard work to get you out the other side. Is that fair?
Absolutely. Like it, when we were up at the main event, I gave a talk about, money being emotional. Well, like the path through the university and into the corporate world and into where I'm at now was formulaic. But like, what do you do when it's, your 5th day getting up at 4 a.m., doing it again? The formula doesn't mean shit at that point, right? When you suffer in rejection after rejection after rejection, the formula doesn't mean anything. It's the emotions that are underneath it that actually mean something. It's the belief that I can do it. It's dealing with the shame as it comes up. It's doing deep work while you're falling off the cliff.
Yeah.
And at the end of it, it's really getting to a point where you say, in my case, it was kind of a traumatic end, right? It was a rise or die situation. And, once you have that, it will drive you forward.
It's this concept of vision and getting what you want is something that it's really easy to lose track of. It's very easy for a man who feels rudderless or directionless to not think of what he truly wants as an outcome. So he gets caught in the rat race. He puts his head down and he just tries to jackhammer his way through it. And just like you said, day 4 of really getting after it comes. You wake up, you get out of bed, and you say, what the hell am I doing? And that's when guys fail. It's because they're not staying focused on what they truly want, what their end game is. This goes actually beyond finances. That's why so many men stop on their fitness journeys. This is why so many men stop on their pursuit of education or learning these skills that they've been wanting to learn for such a long time. Because they don't see the end. They lose the forest for the trees. And what you're saying resonates a lot. You have to know so intimately what you want that is going to be driven inside of you with such force that there's going to be nothing stopping you from accomplishing that.
Yeah, 100%. And I also think there's the other component. I mean, you mentioned fitness, and I personally think that like you can't get your fitness straight without your finances starting to come along, right? Just like you can't get fit without your food. You can't get your finances together without having some fitness, and that's going to impact your relationships. Like there isn't a singular bucket here. It's an all of the above. And I also, in that there is like with fitness, right? For those of you who can't see me or haven't met me, I'm not exactly a small person. And I have struggled with weight my whole life. Why? Because I truly believe that I'm not worth the time and investment to work out, right? It's not that I don't know what to do. It's that I have a lot of underlying emotional blocks that I'm slowly chipping away at to get there. It's the exact same thing with money. It's the exact same thing with, advancing your life. The vision part of it, I've watched people make a vision. I see them light up and then they douse that flame because they're so afraid that they're not worth it. And that's really like when I'm sitting with a client or I'm emotionally, I'm doing any financial coaching, the emotional component, sitting down first off with like, let's get clear on your vision. Okay, cool. Now, why are we not working towards it? Well, and then pretty soon we're talking about things that happened when they were 4, right? Things that happened when they were, in high school. A lot of older wounds that are holding them back from being able to move forward.
It's amazing how emotionally or how closely tied those emotions and the financial part of the journey is. Question for you though, we talked in one of our recent episodes about kind of celebrating the little victories. When you had this epiphany with the teaching and you decided that there had to be a different route that you had to take, and you've got this grand picture out here of the backyard and the grill and the steaks and the kids and all of this. That's a long journey, right? Mm-hmm. And yes, you use that vision to drive you, but how were you? I imagine that you had to break that up into stages or break that up into segments to at least drive to a milestone. Were you doing that at all, or was it just that final vision that kept pulling you through?
Oh, great question. So the way I always kind of think about it, and I do this with my battle team, where I tell people to sit down and write 2 eulogies. The one that would be given if you died today, and the one you want given when you die when you're 80, because those 2 things are like gun sights. One's the back sight, the other one's the front sight. And now once we have that, now we know where we're going. So we just have to plot the steps in between. For me, so just to kind of like ground this in time frames, I quit teaching in 2015. I bought the house March 2020, right? So that's 5 years. And what was in between that 5 years? I graduated top of my class from my MBA program. I passed the CPA exam. I got an internship at one of the largest, most prestigious accounting firms in the world. A job everyone told me I couldn't get because I was too old, by the way. And, so like there's lots of, like you point out, there's lots of steps in between. And so for me, it was, okay, I'm leaving teaching, got enrolled in the university, the local university. Okay, what do I need at this step right here, right now? I need an A in this class, right? Okay, if I want that house, I got to get this A today. And so I just focused. I didn't think about Econ 102. I looked at Econ 101 and was like, I am going to be the best student here. And of course, like we all go back to that young place in school. Like, I don't want to be a nerd. I don't want to raise my hand. No, fuck that. I want a house with a grill. Raising my hand, being like, that doesn't make any sense. I think you're full of shit, professor. Like, all right, who wants to study? And like, just being completely done fucking around at that step, right? Once I had the A, it was like, all right, cool. I'm going to treat myself, because I'm poor at the time. So like, I'm going to treat myself to having a latte instead of black drip coffee today. So I would sit down, I would have my latte. I would actually like go to my study spot at the coffee shop in Flagstaff and read a book instead of study. And like, I would do that for one Saturday, and then Sunday I'd get back to work the next thing, So like there's every bit was like, okay, I got that. I was brilliant at my last at bat. Now it doesn't count anymore, and I'm back at square one. And I kind of looked at it as like, I'm climbing this ladder. I'm going to be the best there is here. Once I'm there, okay, I need to find a new fish tank, so to speak, so I can become a bigger and bigger fish. And so you're 100% right that every step along the way had to be excellent, right? Like I had to focus on that step. Like the mountain was good, but I had to take the step in front of me. And one of the objections I've heard from men that I've coached is, well, what happens if I change my mind? What happens if my vision changes? What happens if life circumstances come and get me? I don't know, man, but I do know that you'll be in a better position if you're excellent right now than you will be if you're not, right? So I kind of looked at it as like, even if the course corrects, even if I change trajectory, if I am top of my graduating class, I can't possibly be hurt by that.
Yeah. So talk a little bit about how your confidence level changed as you went through that, right? Because it sounds to me as though as you're working through, you're also building a foundation. This is what you're talking about is equivalent of building a house. You excavate, you build the foundation, you build the walls, and everything kind of goes up and begins to accumulate together. So talk to us a little bit about how your confidence level started to grow as you started to hit those little milestones. And like you said, if you had to course correct, you would have been able to.
Yeah. So when I walked out of my principal's office, this kind of goes back to Brad's question, right? What the hell? Right? Like, what's going on?
Yeah.
I literally, like, from her office, you hung a left and you went down to the bathrooms at the end of the hallway. And I literally went down there and like blocked myself in and like was splashing water on my face. And I just, while I'm sitting there, I looked myself in the eye in the mirror and went, we're in, man. Like, I literally said to myself, we're in. Like, the die's cast, like, there's no going back now. And, I went home and I told my wife and she was like, okay. And then we had an argument about it later. Like, there were so many times that I stumbled and there's so many times that I fell. And I started repeating a mantra that I learned when I was doing mortgages, which is, I don't see failure as failure. I see it as the feedback I need to succeed. Right. And so, like, going in and being like, okay, I'll give you this example. I want to get a job at the Big Four. Like, if I'm going to do this, if I'm going to go this accounting route, like, because the whole reason I chose accounting wasn't because I love accounting or numbers. It was because it was the fastest way to go from where I was to be in the room where decisions are made. Like, that was the fastest path. That's what I felt I was worthy of. That's what I decided I was worthy of. I didn't actually feel it at the time, but that's where the money was, and that would get me the house. So that's where I was going. And I was like, okay, what do I need? I need to learn to interview really well, right? And so I went in and I said, I went into the career development office at the university and was like, what are the mock interviews? They're like, well, we have some for finance. We have some for insurance. We have some for accounting. I was like, all of them. I'm going to do all of them. Like, I literally signed up for all of them. And I had like an emergency suit in my car so that if I ever had an opening came up, if something was full, I could quick throw on a suit and go interview. And I remember I walked into a mock interview. So no stakes, right? Low risk type of situation with Vanguard Financial. And I interviewed my ass off. And I thought, man, I am doing so good in this interview. And we get to the end of it. And I asked the guy, I said, well, would you hire me? And he laughs and goes, absolutely fucking not. You're a disaster. And I'm like crushed, like sitting there like, oh my God. Because I really thought I killed it. And I was like, okay, hold on a second. Like, I don't see failure as failure. I see it as the feedback I need to succeed. And I went, okay, how do I get you to yes? And he was like, oh, I'm glad you asked. And I took, like, I still have the notebook. There's like 4 pages of notes of what he gave me. And so I realized at the time, like, okay, I'm clearly overconfident. I think I'm better than I am. And now I've been crushed. And so now how do I build it back up? It's reps. So like the woman who runs the career development office at my university, she had my cell phone number and would call me because I was there so often of like, I need a new chance to fail. I need a new chance to fail. I need a new interview. And like this got to the point where like I was going over to the biology department and interviewing for like jobs as a nurse's assistant just to practice at being uncomfortable, to practice being in bad situations. And like the end of the story was that that guy from Vanguard, I interviewed with him 7 times. And he knew me. And the very last one, and like, this is how I know, like, you want to talk about building confidence? I failed and failed and failed with this guy. Like, and he would actually like stop interviews and be like, you made the same mistake that you did last time, Dylan. But on the 7th interview, I walked in and I was like, hey, how's it going? And he pulls out a piece of paper and slides it across the table. And it was a job offer. I never applied for Vanguard. He was making me an offer during a mock interview. And why? Because he was like, my God, you've grown so much. You've had this thing. So you want to talk about building confidence. Confidence comes from being willing to fail repeatedly.
Yep.
Yeah.
You know, it's fail fast, fail frequently, fail forward. Give yourself every low risk at bat And I kind of had taken this thing of like the die's cast, right? I want the house. So what do I want? Do I want the house, or do I want to sit here and feel safe and secure that I never have to grow and I don't have to be awkward? Or am I willing to just walk in and be like, hi, I'm Dylan. I hope you like me, to hi, I'm Dylan. And you want to hire me because I'm the best there is.
I've probably heard you mention at least 50 times during this conversation opportunities where you easily could have thrown in the towel because something got hard, because you got an answer you didn't want. You were told you were too old to do this. You were told you interviewed like shit. All these things. How many guys, how many common men would have stopped at any one of those single things? You didn't do it. Not once. You failed fast. You kept failing, but you did what every good man should do, and you learned from that failure. That's such a powerful lesson, man. Like, you could have stopped at any point during this journey over the last, 14 years at this point. And I'm sure that there were probably some days where you looked at yourself in the mirror and said, what the hell am I doing? But the fact that you were so singularly focused on the backyard, your kids there, the stakes, what you wanted for yourself, the house, like, that's a powerful lesson, man. That nothing stopped you because you were so singularly focused on what you wanted that you were going to fail, and you were going to be okay with failure. And most importantly, you're going to grow from all of those failures.
The self-worthiness was the hardest part in the first year, right? Coming out of school, of like, am I worth this? And there were so many times where you're right, that I could have quit. The missing component here is, if you didn't know, stress can cause gout flares. And going back to graduate school with, a wife and kids, and 2 kids at that time. And, now there's no income coming in, and you got to be the top of your class. You got to do these interviews. I ended up with gout in both feet for 4 months. So like, crutching into school and stuff like that. And no one would have faulted me for going out there, but it was at the end of the day of saying, no, like I'm worth this. I'm worth more than this. My kids are worth more than this. And it's easy to focus on the glory. It's harder to focus on, you wake up in the morning, you're exhausted, you're still buzzing from the caffeine you consumed the day before. And you're like, motherfucker, the pain tells me I'm alive. You swing your feet out of bed, your feet hurt, you feel like crap. Your wife comes in and, how are you this morning? Unbelievable, honey. I am unbelievable today. Today is the best day ever, right? Like, it's hard. And I'm even choking up now because like, those were hard days. It was really hard days. And it just, I had to continue to think to myself, like, no, I'm worth this. I had this vision. This is the path. I can do this. I'm worth doing this. No one promised me it was going to be easy. They just promised me it was going to be worth it. And so just keep going, and you eventually, tell you how sick I am. I eventually got to the point where like, yes, I wake up in the morning and be like, this is going to be hard. And be like, yeah, come at me, bro. Like, but I had so many times where I've been knocked down and stood back up and be like, all right, let's do it again. Like, and then what happened though, is that I started to win. Right. I lost consistently for like 9 months over and over again. And then I remember the day that like life stopped giving me lemons, going back to lemon cannon. Right. If I bombard life hard enough, it'll stop giving me ammunition. About like halfway through my first semester, the university decided that they were going to cancel the path I was on. And we're like, nope, we're just not doing this. We don't allow this non-traditional path anymore. And I was like, the fuck you are. And I went into the registrar's office and I was like, hold on, like, hey, like I need to talk to the registrar. And the little 18-year-old woman who was sitting there was like, oh, he's busy. I was like, is that him in the back? She's like, yeah. I was like, cool. And I just walked past it and then like walked into his office. Like, hi, you're going to make time for me now. So like 4 days later, it's like 6 o'clock in the morning and I'm sitting outside the university admin building while I'm watching the president of the university get out of her car. Because like everyone had told me no. And so like, this is my last stop. And I walk up and I stand up and I'm in a suit, right? And because this is a big day for me. And I stand up and I was like, good morning, Dr. Chang. And she's like, good morning, Dylan. And I'm like, she knows my name. I was like, someone called you? She's like, oh yeah, your reputation precedes you. I think the exact words that they told me were, it's easier to give you what you want. and like, it was at that day that I was like, fuck. Life was like, maybe we shouldn't give him another lemon. This sucks. And it comes down to like, it's easy to look at the headlines, but like there were more dark days than not. And eventually when you start winning, Like our system, particularly in the corporate world, is once you start winning, you tend to keep winning. Once you start losing, you tend to keep losing. And once I started winning big everywhere. Right. So like, I went from being told I'm too old to I got every job I applied for. Right. I went from too old to be in the Big Four to getting 4 offers from the Big Four. I went from being told I couldn't do it to people coming and asking me how you did it. I went from being told that this was not a great option for me and my family to them paying me to do my last year of school. But it really just came down to I had to be willing to get to a point where it was like, yes, this is going to be hard. And I'm willing to do it.
It's even getting me I'm over here feeling pretty emotional right now. That's awesome.
I mean, I hope what's coming through is the passion for building my own self. I say all the time, I said this in Maine, money is emotional. I did all of this for the money, and it's the emotions. The emotions are the key. The emotions are the key. It's not the spreadsheets. It's when people come to me and be like, what's your secret? I love Dylan Bain. Like, that's the secret. I love Dylan Bain.
I'm going to push back on what you said, though. You just said, I did it all for the money. I don't believe that at all. I believe you did that for what it provides you and your family in the situation that it puts you in. I don't believe that you're, use the word money hungry or anything like that. I believe that you have a true and sincere want to provide a lifestyle for you and your family that exceeds all expectations or exceeds where you were, quote unquote, supposed to be in life.
Mm-hmm.
To say I did it for the money is, I don't buy that. You use it as a tool, nothing more.
Yeah, that's a totally fair pushback, 100%. And my response to that would be, how many people go through and like, I want the house, I want the yard, I want the stakes, right? But they're afraid of the money, right? When they go like, because for me it was, why do I want to be at the Big Four? Like, why? Well, first off, because I wanted to prove to myself I could be elite, right? I was already a fantastic teacher, but like, I realized that teaching is a kind of a BS profession, right? Because it's a game. So I wanted to prove I could be elite. Well, was that arrogance, or was that just an exercise in learning to love myself enough to give myself permission to be elite, right? Why else did I want the Big Four? Because it would give me the highest exit opportunities I possibly could in terms of money.
Right.
So people would say like, oh, it's somehow less because you're pursuing the money. Well, yes, I chase dollar signs. Like when I left the Big Four and I went to my current job, they underbid me. I came in under market, and I told my boss the very first day, I was like, I came under market. I know I came under market. I'm going to give you my work for a discounted rate for 1 year. And then I expect at least a 10% raise and a promotion. And they gave it to me after a year, right? Again, with the be excellent at every step, right? I really wowed them, and I got a 25% raise in my first year. Some people would say like, I don't want to pursue the money. No, fuck you. I wanted to pursue the money. Why now? Why did I want to pursue the money? Because I wanted to just be Scrooge McDuck stacking coins? No, it's because I want, I want the house. I want the swimming lessons for my kids. I want the financial base so that when my job tells me here's something unethical to do, I can tell them how far up their ass they can stick it. Right. And I believe it's really important to point out that and I still chase the dollar sign, because the dollar sign represented freedom, right? So, yeah, you're right. I didn't just do it for the money, but at the end of the day, I also still did it for the money.
Oh, I hear you. Yeah, that makes perfect sense.
I agree. There's something you mentioned while you were telling that story. You talked about men feeling worthy. There are too many times where you're presented with a job opportunity. I've been presented at times in the past where there's a little bit of a leap of faith required. There'd be a big payoff at the end. And I cowered. I got scared. I didn't feel worthy of it. Why do you think that is? Is that imposter syndrome? Is that self-doubt? What is that? We've all been there.
Ooh, how much more time you got? It's a common thing. Like, I've been told, and it's hard for me to see myself, right? I've been told that when people meet me, like, the thing that they pick up on is like, that guy's just all confidence. No. When I gave the speech at the main event, like, I gave a hell of a barn burner. And my hands were ice cubes. I was sweating profusely. I felt sick to my stomach. I was terrified. Like, all of those things are true. And so I think there's in part, we look at it and go, oh, that person is so good and I could never be them, when what they don't see is me crying in the bathroom, right? What they don't see, like, and that happened more than I care to talk about at the university. I'd go and lock myself in the bathroom and have a good cry, so I could get all the emotions processed and all the emotions out, and then I would get up and go to the next fight. But more to the point, the feeling of self-worthiness, I struggle with is to try to pinpoint where it comes from. I think in part we're conditioned in society to not think of ourselves as worthy. And there's a lot of reasons why that is. I think that particularly for men in the school system, our talents are not rewarded. And so I think that we're constantly told, like, sit down, sit still, put your hands on the desk. Like, these are things that when we look at it and go, but my gifts are not to sit still at this damn desk, lady. It's we're internalizing shame from that early age onward. And then we get to the corporate world, we get to our jobs, and what are we told? Like, just do a really good job and keep your head down. And then somebody, like the magic promotion fairy, will come over and select you as one of the elected individuals and put in. That never happens. Why? Because you keep your head down. Because the people who get promoted are the arrogant assholes like me who step up and go, look how cool I am. You don't want to lose me. Right. And until you've been in that situation where you've had a chance to sit there and go, yeah, I'm going to shoot this shot. And if I miss, that's okay, because I've done harder things than miss a shot. Until you've had that opportunity, you're not going to feel worthy. Now, I think I really think it's something that's beat out of people, where they start going, I'm not worthy of six figures. I don't add enough value. I don't know. Do you? Do you believe you add enough value? Because if you do, then you do, right? Like, it's really just as simple as that, when I look at, what I charge for financial coaching, am I worth that? I'm actually probably worth a lot more, right? And so we don't do anything in society to tell people what their worth is. We don't spend any time explaining to kids that, like, no, you are worthy of whatever you pursue, because we tell them to be out of the way. We tell them to be quiet. We tell them to be seen and not heard. All that's abusive shit. And all of that undercuts people's sense of self-worth. And I'm just beating that up with my mouth because I wasn't ready for that question. So I hope I gave a good answer.
No, that was a good answer. That was a really good one. You're right. There are too many times where people allow their worth to be determined by what their paycheck says, or what their boss tells them, or what their abusive significant other tells them. It's very easy to downplay what you're really worth. And one of the biggest takeaways from this story and this interview with you and this conversation is that you did not allow governors to be set on your self-worth any step of the way. If you needed to go talk to the registrar, if you needed to go talk to the dean, if you needed to go talk to whomever to get where you needed to go, you were going to have those conversations. You're going to approach a principal who's going to tell you to do something unethical and tell her where to go. You made your self-worth, and you had to do that every step of the way, terrified, scared shitless, locking yourself in the bathroom to cry it out because you knew it was the right thing to do. And once you release that governor, you going way back to the whole concept of David Goggins, you went from using 40% of your potential to a hell of a lot more than that, man. That's awesome.
Well, I would also counter with, what's the alternative, right? Like, by the time that I hit that moment with my principal, I had done everything right. I went to school. I kept my head down. I did really good at my job. And I did all the things that the civilized path was supposed to reward me for. And here I am on food stamps and welfare, in a shitty ass apartment, working 2 additional jobs in addition to my full-time one. Like, what did doing the, approved path get me? Shit on is what it got me, And so, like, there's a question of, do I buy into the story that this is happening because I brought it to me? Well, yes. And then the additional story of, and that's because you deserve it. Well, no, I don't deserve that. No one deserves that. Right. So, the feelings of self-worth are just huge. And what's the alternative? Which brings you to why people, like, when I'm doing financial coaching and walking people through, like, the emotions of money, I get people all the time like, I'm not worthy of a savings account. Like, they don't say that, but that's what it always comes down to. I'm not worthy of this. I'm not worthy of being out of debt. I'm not worthy of advancing my career. And having to sit down and be like, what's your alternative? It's to sit exactly where you are and complain. Not everyone's going to go do what I did, sure, but what's the alternative?
Is it really as simple? Is it really as straightforward as they're scared of changing the status quo, and they're scared of doing something outside of what society tells them they're supposed to do?
So I think it's important to say that simple doesn't mean easy.
Right.
Right.
that's a like the path is actually very simple. It's incredibly not easy. But I'd heard this statement years ago, and that's that familiar hells are preferable to strange heavens. People will fight tooth and nail to maintain homeostasis because they believe it brings them safety, right? And you see this, particularly with young boys who grew up in fatherless homes where they were conditioned in a certain way that this is how you behave because that's what their mother thought was going to be good for them. And then now they're adults and they're incapable of moving forward because they were taught to just be good little boys, right? And so they're going to fight tooth and nail to maintain homeostasis because on a neurological, psychological level, they believe that that's what they have to do to stay safe. And if they just stay safe long enough, then their mother will love them. And so it really is, as like you said, it's as simple as they just don't want to move because they're afraid. Because even though they know this sucks, over the next hill might suck more. And if I leave here, then I have to admit that everything I've done up to this point in my life was never going to get me love in the first place. That it was all a lie. How many people want to face that?
Yeah.
For me in teaching, like I said, I became a teacher for the most noble of reasons. I wanted to work with the youth of the nation. I wanted to have an impact. I wanted to craft the future of my country. That's what I looked at as my job, creating better citizens for the Republic. And I had a traumatic break where nope, that was a lie. There was no question after that point that this was bullshit. Not ever and that's why there's so many stories of people were and then one day everything exploded and I was like, you know what? Fuck it. I'm done. That's why those stories are so prevalent because typically that's what it takes. Right. Mm-hmm. So when people come to me in financial coaching, one of the questions I have to ask myself is this person done fucking around? Are they willing to let go of a familiar hell to go find a strange heaven? And when you do that, it's like when you have somebody who's suffered abandonment issues, somebody who doesn't have attachment, has attachment disorders, and you're working with their money, when they start to have success, they're going to freak out because it's like somebody who's been in the cold their whole life and you just put them in a warm shower. That sucks. And you got to hold them there for a second so that they can warm up.
Yeah. What do you got going on there, Brad?
I'd write down that quote, man. That really resonated with me. Are you willing to let go of a familiar hell to pursue a strange heaven? That got me thinking, man.
Well, Dylan, that was great. We could sit here and talk for hours, but I want to be cognizant of everyone's time. So we'll wrap it up and hopefully we'll have you back on here at some point. Why don't you let the guys know where they can find you?
Yeah, absolutely. You can find me on Instagram and Twitter and Facebook, all at Fiscally Savage, or you can come visit me at fiscallysavage.com. And, for your listeners, I would thoroughly encourage them to go to the website and sign up for the emailing list because we got a lot of exciting stuff that's going to be coming out, various offerings and different classes and opportunities to work with me.
Yeah, and I'll second that. I've checked out Dylan's website. I've got some of the free tools that he's got up there. They're really good, useful stuff that I'm starting to implement at home. Absolutely recommend it. So, fellas, thanks for listening. Make sure you come back next week. We've got more good stuff in the hopper for you. In the meantime, check us out on untamingmasculinity.com. You can check out all of the show notes for this and other episodes, as well as links to our social media. The one thing we do ask is that you leave a rating and review for us in your podcast player. That helps us spread the word to other men. Other than that, we look forward to seeing you next week. And until then, we'll leave you with just one question. What are you doing to untame your masculinity?